This is the 10% Happier Podcast. I'm Dan Harris. Happy Friday, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about a truly game-changing concept. I've found this to be incredibly helpful. It helps me to be way less hateful and judgmental to deeply wired tendencies on my part. Just to back up, basically what we're doing on Fridays these days is we're highlighting some of the golden nuggets from our vast archive. So the system we've been using this month is that we go to our staff members and ask them, like, what's still with you from the many, many years of this show? And this week we went to the newest member of our team, Taylor Brendares, who's our director of operations. And she mentioned this moment that was also a huge moment for me in an interview that I did with Dr. Becky Kennedy, who's a rock star in the parenting advice world, but she also has plenty to say for non-parents. And she has this concept called MGI, which I will not spoil for you. I will let Taylor and then Becky explain it to you. But here's how this is going to work. After a quick break, we'll come back and we'll hear from Taylor. She'll describe why this moment was so impactful, and then we'll play the moment from Dr. Becky. Before we do that, just a quick reminder that we're offering bespoke guided meditations for all of our Monday, Wednesday episodes, and we have now decided to offer those indefinitely, so that's cool. For this entire month, the great meditation teacher Kyra Jewel-Lingo has crafted meditations to go with all of our Monday, Wednesday episodes. These are available only to paid subscribers over at danharris.com. This is a Friday episode, so there's no meditation to go with this one. Another thing I want to plug is that I'll be up at the Omega Institute for another installment of Meditation Party in late October. This is an in-person extravaganza with my friends Sevene Selassie and Jeff Warren. Also, this time, Afosu Jones-Cortez is coming. Like I said, October 24th through 26th at Omega, which is north of New York City. You can sign up at eomega.org, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Okay, quick break. Then we'll hear from Taylor, then Dr. Becky.
Hi, I'm Taylor Brendares, Director of Operations, and my staff pick is Dan's conversation with Dr. Becky Kennedy. As a mom of two little boys, a 5 and a 2-year-old, and someone who's trying to just show up better in all areas of life, this episode really landed for me in a personal way. Dr. Becky's idea of the path of repair has genuinely changed how I parent. And that's not in a one-time aha moment kind of way. It's something that I find myself learning and relearning every single day. I remember one moment clearly when my oldest was pushing his little brother around again, and I just snapped. I yelled, and the second it came out of my mouth, I regretted it. It hit me immediately. And I realized that I often expect more from him just because he's the oldest, and that's not fair. He is still so little. So instead of brushing it off and just moving on, I circled back a little later and I said, hey, I got too mad. I didn't like how I handled that. It wasn't some big emotional moment, but I could feel him soften. That's not to say that I didn't tell him what he did was wrong. I absolutely did. But I also knew that I didn't like the way that I had said it. And that's what stuck with me. That's what I took from Dr. Becky, that repair is not about being perfect. It's about being willing to reconnect. I've also started using her idea of most generous interpretation, especially with my husband. When things are chaotic and he doesn't immediately jump in, I try to pause and think, maybe he's not ignoring what's going on. Maybe he just needs a beat. Maybe he's in his own head thinking about something that happened at work or trying to shift gears before he jumps in. And that tiny mental shift, whether it be in parenting or in partnership, has helped me respond instead of react. And that space, even just for a few seconds, has made a real difference. And it's not just as a parent or a partner, but as a person just navigating everyday relationships with a little bit more patience and care.
Thank you, Taylor, and welcome again to the team. And I love that you remember that moment because that moment really landed for me. So now let's hear the key part of the interview with Dr. Becky, where she talks about the power of repair. And I should say, just to plug Dr. Becky, that much of this material comes from a great TED Talk she gave, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. Let's start with the TED Talk. You start the talk by describing a fight with your son. Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So essentially, I had been cooking dinner for my family. It was a Sunday night. And Sunday nights to me they're just so hard. Like there's a million things that were undone from the weekend. There's a million things I know I need to do for the week. And so I'm often kind of on edge. So I actually cooked dinner that night, which is not something I usually do, but I did. And then my son kind of walked into the kitchen and he just looked at the table and he's like, oh, chicken again. And then he kind of like mumbled like disgusting like that. And there's so many things I wish I did in that moment, but I didn't. And I just exploded. And I think my body was just completely full of frustration at that moment. There was not like 1 ounce left to metabolize any additional frustration. And so it all came out. And I just yelled at him. I was like, what is wrong with you? You're so spoiled, and just kind of went on in this scary, reactive way. He then proceeded to say, I hate you. And then he ran out of the kitchen. He ran to his room. He slammed the door. He's alone there. I'm alone in the kitchen. And, that's how the night began.
Sounds like good parenting to me. What's the problem?
Well, and I think this is the focus of the TED Talk. And in that moment happened. And I actually think every single person, like if you're a parent, you're like, yeah, that moment happened in my house. If you're not a parent, you're like, oh, I've said things I didn't want to say. I've used a tone that I am not proud of, right? That is the moment. And then often what we do after the moment, and I did this, we spiral. We usually spiral in one form of blame. And actually often we seesaw, right? The blame of what's wrong with my kid? My kid is so obnoxious. I'm cooking food. What's wrong with my kid? Or it's what's wrong with my boss? Or what's wrong with my partner? Like what's wrong with the other person? And then we seesaw between that and like, what's wrong with me? Why did I do that? I messed up this other person forever. I'm such an asshole, right? And irony, and I think the thing that the talk really speaks to is what does in some ways more damage to another person isn't actually the event or the moment of yelling. It's actually what happens in that spiral, because as we spiral in blaming someone else and or blaming ourselves, we actually fail to go reconnect and to repair the relationship. And repair, as is the subject of the TED Talk, is actually the most powerful parenting strategy we have. So we miss out on this really, really important overall relationship moment.
So mess ups are going to happen in parenting or any other relationship. It's what you do subsequently, the repair, that is the key.
Yeah. And I think there's like a really big picture here, right? I didn't talk about this too much in the TED Talk, but a lot of my thoughts around repair really come from trauma literature and understanding trauma. And we know trauma is not the event that happened. It's the way an event gets processed in your body. I think another way of saying that, I love Gabor Mate's way. He says, trauma isn't the thing that happens to you. It's kind of what happens inside of you. And so parents, non-parents, we all can really focus on the event, on the moment. But in every relationship, it's actually more about whether that moment gets stored in our body next to aloneness and nobody talking about it, or denial from other people, or whether that moment gets stored next to connection and safety and love and explanation and understanding that actually determines the way the event gets remembered in our body. So yes, those moments happen for everyone. Everyone yells, everyone snaps, everyone says the thing that's imperfect. We all do. And I think what I really want people, to shift in terms of their perspective is rather than focusing on the kind of harmful impact of the event, to really, really be aware of the healing, powerful opportunity of the repair that can happen next.
This is an interesting reframe because most of us, as you said, use moments of dysregulation to blame other people and beat the shit out of ourselves. But actually, the reframe that I'm hearing from you is, oh, these are going to happen anyway. You might as well view them as an opportunity.
Completely. And we've inherited those coping mechanisms, right? Like that tendency to blame ourselves or blame someone else. I mean, that's not something we were born with, right? Like no baby is like in their crib waking up their parents at 2 a.m. and being like, oh, like is that too much? Like, did I really need that feeding? Or I'm such a selfish baby. We're not born with that tendency to blame. And actually, that tendency we all have, which we can talk more about why, but the blaming mentality is a very stuck mentality. There's no movement possible. I'm kind of burrowing back into myself, or I'm focusing all my energy on how awful someone else was. Nobody can make any changes from that place. So it's also, and I know you're a pragmatist too, Dan, like it's a very ineffective mindset. Because after we yell, most of us don't want to do that again. And so it's about finding a mindset and a couple of next steps that actually can help us change rather than keep us stuck in that awful moment.
So you talk about the 3 steps for repair. Let's go through them. Step number 1 is actually internal, not external.
Yeah, when I think of 3 steps to repair, the first step, okay, and I really mean this, is to mess up. And that I think is so important. It's helped me personally as a recovering perfectionist so much, because I remember being in grad school and hearing this line that my professor said in passing. And I remember being like, I'm not going to hear anything else you said. That thing you said in passing was just so profound. And what she was talking about was how repair is a marker of secure attachment. Kids who had more repairs growing up were more likely to have a secure attachment. Secure attachment basically predicts everything good that we want for our kids. And then she kept talking about attachment. And I was like, wait a second. No one else is finding this profound. If repair is a marker of secure attachment, that means everyone ruptures. Why is no one highlighting this? Because also, if repair helps kids get into secure attachment, then you can't repair if you didn't rupture. It's almost like full permission to mess up. It's like you have to rupture to get good at repair. And so when I think about the 3 steps of repair and saying step 1 is rupture, which means yelling, saying the thing you don't want to say, messing up, whatever you want to say, that actually is step 1. And the reason that helps me so much is because, and I did this in the kitchen after I yelled at my son, I was like, okay, instead of going to the abyss of I'm an awful parent, I messed up my kid forever, I actually pictured this road. And I'm like, okay, I'm actually on the road to repair. And I know I'm on the road because I just ruptured. If step 3 is repairing with my kids, step 1 is rupturing. I crushed that step. I'm a third of the way there. That's pretty close. Look at my momentum, right? And I really do say that to myself. Wow, look at me. I'm getting closer. Okay, so that's step 1. And if you're thinking about repair, you've already done step 1. It's pretty compelling. Step 2 is repairing with ourselves. And this is the step that I think too many people were never taught. And it's really the singular reason why so many people would say, yeah, I'm not good at apologizing. And it's not because you're selfish, and it's not because you don't have empathy. It's actually probably because you hold yourself with such derision and shame and blame that you literally can't face the reality of this thing you did. So we can never repair with someone else if we can't accept that this not so good thing actually is something that we did. And the only way we can accept that we did a kind of bad thing is actually by differentiating how I'm still a good person who did a bad thing. And if I can't repair in that way, which does not mean excusing it, we mix up all those things, okay? If I can't separate for myself, hey, Becky, I'm a good person who did a bad thing. I'm a good parent who loves her kid who yelled. Really separating what I say is my good identity from my bad behavior, it will be actually completely impossible to repair with my kid. We cannot give out compassion and connection and goodness if we haven't re-accessed those qualities in ourselves. We can't give out what we don't have in. It's just I don't know, there's physics, I think. It's just not possible. It's actually not physics, but it's something. And then the last step is actually repairing with your kid. And this is where I think getting into some of the details matter, because I think a lot of us probably have received apologies that didn't feel good. And that is not what I'm talking about. A repair is not, sorry I yelled, but if you didn't complain about dinner, it wouldn't have happened. That is not a repair. And if my son had said, yeah, I really didn't like when you yelled at me, if I say, yeah, I'm sorry you feel that way, that is that classic line, should be thrown in the garbage. It is not a repair. A repair is naming what happened, taking responsibility for your behavior, acknowledging the impact it had on someone else. And if you really want to go for bonus points, kind of sharing what you would do differently the next time or what you're working on. And that sounds very different than, I'm sorry, but if you didn't do that, it wouldn't have happened. Sounds more like, hey, I yelled at you in the kitchen and it's never your fault when I yell. I'm sure that felt really scary. And look, I was frustrated, but I'm working on managing my frustration so it doesn't come out as a yell.
Does repair always involve an abject apology and admission of fault? What if it's more complicated? What if your kid wasn't being awesome in that moment, and sometimes when we lose our shit with other people, they're being worse than that?
100%. So there's a lot of nuance here. So there's a couple things, because I know, as a parent, you're like, but if he didn't say that, you wouldn't have yelled. Isn't he kind of responsible? Or, you say in a partnership, but my wife said this kind of not so nice thing. So she kind of did make me snap back at her. Okay. But here's one of the things I think about here. Number one, we confuse our right to feel frustration with our right to express frustration in an angry, disrespectful way. They're two very different things. The right to have a feeling and our responsibility to manage that feeling so we can show up as a respectful person, especially in the relationships we care about. Those are two very different things. My son saying that, or maybe let's say my partner constantly being late for dinners. Yeah, of course I feel frustrated. And of course that relates to my son saying he didn't like dinner or my husband being late. That is completely different from feeling like I have a right to express that frustration in any way I choose to express it. I think it's so important to differentiate that. So that's number one. Number two, when parents say this to me, they say, yeah, well, I said to my kid, look, if you just listened to me and got ready in time, I wouldn't have yelled. Or if you didn't complain about dinner, you wouldn't have gotten yelled at. Okay, this is what I say, okay? Because what we model to our kid is what they will do in the future. Dan, I imagine being at my son's house, I don't know, however many years from now, let's say he's married. Who knows if he will be. And I hear him say, let's say to his partner, look, I'm sorry I yelled at you, but if you had just remembered to bring toilet paper home, it wouldn't have happened. I'm sorry I yelled at you, but if the dinner you made actually tasted good, it wouldn't have happened. To me, it's literally cringeworthy if my kid would think that that is an acceptable way to talk to someone. And I don't know any adult who would be like, yeah, I would feel pretty awesome if I heard my kid talk to some of their loved ones in that way. And if we don't want our kids to become adults who communicate with others in that way, we just can't communicate with our kids in that way and expect it to be any different. There's also a bigger picture here if we zoom out. I realized I'm very, very big on personal agency, right? And I always say to parents, what's going on with your kid isn't your fault. I believe that. That is a firm, firm belief of mine. Another equally firm belief that I just sit side by side is, okay, so what's going on with my kid isn't my fault. I am the adult. I'm the leader in the room. And so it is not only my responsibility, I do have an opportunity to think about what I could do to shift a dynamic in the home. Because when we shift something in a system, everyone else in the system actually has to make a shift to accommodate. And so if we give that example of, let's say instead, I yell at my kid every morning because they're never ready for school. And the truth is, if they did put on their shoes, I wouldn't yell. I guess that's true. But to me, it's very disempowering. It's very disempowering as an adult to think, if my 4-year-old just listened to me on time, I wouldn't yell. I am going to put faith in my toddler's change in behavior for me to show up as the adult I want to show up as. That would be like the CEO of a big company saying to their associates, if you all showed up in time, I would be a better leader. I don't think anyone wants that CEO. You want a CEO who's like, hey, here's what I'm going to do from the top because I actually have the most power in this situation. And there's a really important thing that happens. And this happens in my house all the time. When I do say to my kids something like, hey, listen, something like, I'm sorry I yelled. The mornings have been really hectic. I'm frustrated. I'm working on managing that. I always give myself 24 hours later. I always say there has to be 24 hours after repair. Of course, I'm a pragmatist. Then I'll say to my kid, I won't say, now, remember how I apologized to you yesterday? I didn't actually mean it because you're actually just really annoying in the morning. That definitely is not something I recommend. But what I'll say is something from seeing my kid on my same team. I'd say, hey, mornings are so hard. And I ask you to put your shoes on. You don't. I ask again. You don't. And then it gets to the point where things feel really, really bad. And that's on me. And I have to imagine you also want mornings to be smoother. I wonder what we could do to just make mornings smoother. And when kids are approached from a place of collaboration, rather than control or criticism, it shouldn't be shocking that they're actually willing to collaborate. And they're often very willing to apologize. I can't even tell you how many times 24 hours later after a repair, my 5-year-old came and said, and I really didn't listen to you and I'm sorry. And I think this goes back to like this whole idea that drives everything I talk about, that kids are good inside, that if we set up conditions for them to thrive, they don't have to be tricked or sticker charted or timeouted or punished. A lot of that does come out when we lead with a similar generosity.
Yeah, so I'm thinking with my son, if it takes me 5 times to ask him to do something simple, I might say, look, there's going to be a consequence if I have to ask you again, and you might lose 5 minutes for your iPad time or something like that.
Great. And again, this is just how we've all been raised to raise our kids. This is just like everywhere. So we've all been so influenced by so many ideas that I believe are false that are like almost underlying that. Okay, so to me, the thing that's missing about a punishment is, again, if I'm one for effectiveness, is to some degree I have to believe, okay, my kid's not listening. And if I kind of give him a punishment, if I basically deliver him negative feelings after, that will de facto the next time help him listen. And then we'll be having better listening in our house. Okay, first of all, most people I talk to who are on a schedule of a lot of punishments are like, yeah, that's like not really happening. Just like, I don't know, keep saying punishments to my kids. It's not really changing. But I don't even understand the timeline of it. Like, okay, something happened so that my kid isn't listening. Like there's a reason before, then the not listening happens, and I'm delivering a kind of random consequence after. Which means like on some level, I assume the next time, the best way to help my kid change behavior is he's going to be not listening. And he's going to be like, wait a second. If I don't listen in 10 minutes, I'm going to get my iPad time shortened, and I don't want that. So knowing that, I'm going to listen. Like, I don't know about your kid. I don't even know most adults who think that way. Wait a second. If I yell at my husband here, he will be upset. So let me take a deep breath and actually talk to him in a more respectful way. Punishments after, to me, just don't even make sense as a way to change what would happen before. So I'm like, why don't we think about what's happening before? Plus, when you punish a kid, more than anything else, a kid will not remember what we did or what we say. They will remember the version of themselves we reflect back to them. Right? In child development, and I feel like something every parent needs to know, we're a kid's mirror. We show them who they are, and that is how they form their identity. And so often, I'm not saying this with your son, kids who kind of have, quote, a lot of bad behavior, over and over, basically their set of interactions shows them, you're a bad kid. You're a bad kid, go to your room. You're selfish. We even say these things to these kids. And like in some ways, we're reinforcing an identity that we want our kid to move away from it. That also doesn't make sense. So the reason I don't think punishment makes sense isn't because I'm a softie. Like no one who knows me would say I'm soft. That's the last word someone would say. It just not only threatens your relationship with your kid, threatens their self-esteem, but also as a pragmatist, it just like actually doesn't even work to change behavior. So again, if we get to that gap, I do something. And to me, this is my go-to strategy, the idea of good inside to action. It's called MGI, most generous interpretation. What is my most generous interpretation of why my son isn't listening? Most punishments are based on an LGI. We don't realize, why would we punish a kid? Because we're like, they could listen. They just don't want to do it. They don't respect me, right? It's very easy to come up with the least generous interpretation. But if we come up with a most generous interpretation, which is a muscle we need to build, most people when they start, they're like, I couldn't even come up with one. Doesn't mean you're cold. It probably means no one used a most generous interpretation with you when you were struggling. But I might come up with this. There's something about leaving and going to school that is hard. I might say to myself, okay, if I was messing around in my house and my husband's like, Becky, let's leave. Becky, let's leave. Becky, let's leave. I asked you 5 times. Let's leave. Why would I not listen? I'd be like, number one, I would just find that really annoying. Okay. Number two, he's probably yelling on the other side of the house while he's like on his phone. I don't know. Maybe the state of our relationship isn't like that great in that moment. Maybe I actually don't know what leaving entails. There could be so many things for a kid. Maybe they actually don't understand the order of operations. Like, where's my stuff? Maybe they do feel like, hey, my parents on their phone the whole time. They're totally disconnected to me. They're just kind of barking orders. Maybe they feel like I hate school. Maybe they feel like I have no control and agency in any area of my life. So at least this is one area where I can push back to just feel like my own independent person. And I just want to say, none of these things, which come from being curious, means the behavior is okay. But if we don't understand where a problem behavior comes from, we cannot successfully intervene to change the behavior. It would be like trying to teach someone how to make a basketball shot without understanding, like, is it their positioning? Is it their hands? Is it that they're not strong enough? You have to understand the behavior. we confuse this too, especially in America. An attempt to understand a behavior feels like it's condoning a behavior. It's bizarre. It's just not the same thing. If you want to teach a kid how to read, you have to understand if it's a phonics issue or a frustration tolerance issue. It doesn't mean it's okay that they're not reading. It actually means you're trying to help them read. So the reason I don't like punishments is it does none of that. It basically says, I think you're a bad kid. I'm not actually teaching you a skill. Because if I have a most generous interpretation, Dan, for example, I might say, it's actually just overwhelming to get to school. I might say to my kid, mornings have been hard. I always ask you to put things on. You're not listening. But here's the thing. We're on the same team. You're a good kid. I'm going to do something. I'm just going to put on a little chart by your front door. And I'm going to also put your socks in a basket by the door because I know sometimes it's hard to remember. I'm going to do it for mine too. And it's just going to say, water bottle, put it in your backpack, socks, shoes, out the door by 7:45. We're going to see if that helps. And the other thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to say this to myself, is I'm going to actually put my phone down for the 20 minutes in the morning. I'm going to leave it in my room. I'm going to actually talk to my kid, be present. I'm going to see how those things go. And none of that happens when you punish a kid. And I think it's easy to say, oh, so it's because I'm on my phone that my kid isn't listening. To me, that's just the most, again, least generous interpretation even of this approach. It's actually something very different, which is my kid's behavior has a reason. And I'm the leader of the family. And so if I want to help my kid figure things out and change the system, leadership always comes from the top. And so doing that little bit of reflection strengthens your relationship with your kid. And I would bet and I really mean this, the change is so fast. People are like, my kid started listening in 2 days. Literally, I took your listening workshop. 2 days later, they were listening about everything. It's just, it can be so fast when the approach actually makes sense.
Let me just see if I can restate that.
Mm-hmm.
Your approach to getting kids to listen to you is start with the MGI, the most generous interpretation, and then engineer a solution from there.
Yes, that's exactly right. Engineer a solution that's always based in the thought that I have a good kid. So something must just feel off. We often don't think about kids as humans. We don't. We're the same needs, right? Because Dan, if you were witnessing in my house, if I was sitting on the couch reading a book when my 3 kids were finally asleep, which never happens, but let's say I had some glorious evening and it happened. And then my husband was like, hey, Becky, can you go get me a glass of water in the kitchen? And he was sitting on the couch too. If I was no, I'm reading my book or something. And he was like, you have a listening problem and I'm shortening your iPad time today. I feel I don't imagine you, Dan, being Becky, I think you have a listening problem. I think you'd be your husband's an asshole. I think that's what you would say to me. That's gaslighting. If anyone has a problem, he has a problem. I mean, you didn't do what he wanted you to do. I guess you didn't comply, but it's pretty aggressive to say that you have a listening problem. Meanwhile, had me and my husband very close that day, and I don't know, I was talking about something and I felt like he was listening. And he would put his phone down and he's like, wow, that sounds hard. Instead of saying it's not a big deal or, right? And then he asked me, I don't know. I bet I would do it because I felt close to him, right? We listen to people because we feel close to them or because we feel scared of them. It's the only reason we listen to people. And we do not want to wire fear next to love for a million bajillion reasons with our kids. So the only good option we have for our kids to listen is that they feel connected to us. And we have to work to make that happen.
So no fear is ever good. Sometimes I feel
it's better be feared than loved.
No, I don't feel that ever. But there are, once a month, and this is probably just me being shitty, but once a month, once every quarter, I don't know, once in a blue moon, I feel like being a little Old Testament can wake my son up out of just being super stubborn and non-compliant. I think sometimes it's not that deep and they need to, and this is maybe delusion, so I'm saying it out loud for you to take pot shots at it.
Yeah.
Most of the time, yes, there's interesting psychological currents. The MGI makes a ton of sense. I'm going to use that. But sometimes it's not that deep. They're just testing the limits. Or there's something going on with his mom and he's messing with her and manipulating her. And I'm just like, dude, in the car now.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, nothing about my parenting approach, nothing about good inside, again, is soft. It's not always wait, but let me use the most generous interpretation. No, I would say our approach is 50% connection through validation and empathy and 50% connection through boundaries, real boundaries, sturdy boundaries, firm boundaries that come from embodying your appropriate authority. I think we misunderstand fear interactions from boundaried interactions. Most of the time, we put fear into our kids. It really comes from a place of desperation as a parent, and kids smell that. Like when we yell, go to the car, like we're really like, I don't know what to do. Like I really don't have anything left. I'm feeling kind of desperate right now. And so, first of all, like again, not all is lost. Like everyone like says stuff to their kids, me too. And I don't mean to insinuate there's always time for processing. I actually think most parents don't understand what real boundaries are. It's probably one of the biggest things we help parents with, because boundaries have to be an equal part to parenting as like all the kind of quote warm stuff. To me, boundaries also are from a place of warmth because they're from a place of protection.
Thanks again to Dr. Becky Kennedy. Check her out. She's got books. She's got a thriving social media feed and an app. She's really great. And thank you to Taylor for suggesting that excerpt. We'll put a link to the full episode in the show notes. And like I said, Becky's got a lot going on. She's got a website, goodinside.com, where you can dive into her work. Speaking of websites, danharris.com. If you become a member, you can get guided meditations that come with all of our Monday, Wednesday episodes, and also live guided meditation sessions and Q&A with me on the regular. And don't forget to sign up for another live edition of Meditation Party, my in-person workshop at the Omega Institute. There's a link in the show notes. Finally, I want to thank everybody who worked so hard to make this show. Our producers are Tara Anderson, Caroline Keenan, and Eleanor Vasili. Our recording and engineering is handled by the great folks over at Pod People. Lauren Smith is our production manager. Marissa Schneiderman is our senior producer. DJ Kashmir is our executive producer. And Nick Thorburn of the band Islands wrote our theme.